There is one mistake that nearly every retiree with a traditional retirement account makes, and the strangest part about it is that it does not feel like a mistake at all. It feels responsible, it feels safe, it feels like exactly what a careful, disciplined person is supposed to do. And that is precisely why the IRS is quietly counting on you to make it. They are not hoping you do something reckless. They are hoping you do nothing, that you sit perfectly still and behave, because your good behavior is worth far more to them than any error you could ever make on purpose. You have probably heard 1,000 warnings about required minimum distributions, those forced withdrawals the government requires you to take from your traditional accounts later in life. You have heard people call them a tax bomb. You have heard the fear. And here's what we want to share with you today, and it might genuinely surprise you. The required withdrawals themselves are not really the trap. The forced withdrawal is simply the moment the bill finally comes due. The actual mistake, the real one, the one the IRS is counting on, happens decades earlier, quietly, in the years when you believe you are doing everything right. By the time most people even begin worrying about those forced withdrawals, the mistake has already been made, and the window to correct it has already closed. Today we are going to show you what that mistake actually is, why it feels so natural while you are making it, why the IRS quietly benefits every single year you continue making it, and most importantly, the window you still have to undo it before it hardens into a tax bill you can never escape. This is not the standard required withdrawal video where someone simply tells you the age and the scary number. This is about the behavior underneath it, the one nobody questions, the one that is happening in your account right now. Perhaps you have a large traditional account you are quietly proud of. Perhaps it is modest and still growing. Perhaps you have already retired and you think this ship has sailed. It does not matter where you are. The mistake works the same way at every balance and at almost every age. Understanding it is the difference between controlling your own money and handing the controls to the government. And this touches more people than most realize. It is not only about your own account. If you are helping aging parents make sense of their finances, this mistake is almost certainly sitting in their accounts right now. If you have grown children just beginning to build traditional retirement savings, understanding this early could change the entire shape of their retirement decades from now. The mistake is quietly universal. Nearly everyone who has ever been told to save in a traditional account is exposed to it, and almost no one has ever had it explained plainly. So whether this is for you, for someone you love, or simply so you are never caught off guard, stay with us to the end, because the part about how to actually reverse this is the part almost nobody ever hears. One thing to be clear about before we go further, none of this is a loophole, a trick, or a gray area. Everything here is written plainly in the tax rules, available to anyone who knows to look for it. The only reason it feels like a secret is that almost no one is paid to tell you. There is an entire industry built around helping you put money into a traditional account. There is almost no one whose job is to help you take it back out wisely. That silence is not an accident, and it is exactly the silence we are going to break right now. Part 1. Naming the mistake clearly. The mistake is simple. It is leaving your traditional retirement account completely untouched for as long as humanly possible. That is it. That is the whole thing. Most retirees treat that traditional account like a protected object. They live off their Social Security. They spend down their regular savings. They do everything possible to avoid pulling a single dollar out of that traditional account because touching it feels like breaking a rule. They want to let it grow. They want to be responsible. They want to leave it sitting there untouched and growing for as long as they possibly can. And here is why that feels so right. Everything you were ever taught about money points in that direction. Do not touch your retirement. Let it grow. Be patient. Let compounding do its work through your entire working life. That was excellent advice. So when you cross into retirement, you keep following it, because why would you stop doing the thing that worked for 40 years? You keep your hands off that account out of pure discipline. And that discipline, that hard-earned discipline, is exactly what the IRS is counting on. Because here's what almost nobody tells you. That traditional account is not entirely yours. Every dollar in it carries a hidden passenger, a portion of tax that has never been paid. When you contributed that money years ago, you received a tax break. The arrangement was straightforward. You skip the tax now, you pay it later. Well, later is coming. That means a portion of that account has always belonged to the IRS. They are a silent partner in your account, one who never contributed a dime, never took any risk, and yet owns a growing share of everything you built. When you leave that account untouched to grow as large as possible, you are not only growing your money, you are growing their share too. The mistake is not that you saved. The mistake is that you let the unpaid tax sit and compound until it becomes the largest version of itself. Let that be concrete because it surprises people every time. Picture your traditional account showing a comfortable balance on your statement. Most people look at that number and think that is what they have. But that is not what you have. That is what you and the IRS have together. Your real number, the portion you actually keep, is whatever remains after the tax is finally paid. And because nobody can promise you what tax rates will be years from now, you genuinely do not know your own real number. You are looking at a balance that is part yours and part theirs, with an invisible line dividing the two, a line that drifts in their favor the longer you wait. Consider the shape of the arrangement you actually made. When you took that tax break decades ago, you skipped the tax on a modest contribution back when your balance was small. In exchange, you agreed to let them tax a much larger amount later, after years of growth. They traded a small bite, then for a much larger bite now. From their side, it was a brilliant arrangement. Leaving the account untouched is simply you holding up your end of a deal that was always written in their favor. Saving was the right move. Letting the unpaid tax balloon untouched until it is forced out at the worst possible moment is the part that quietly costs people a fortune. The mistake lives only in the second chapter. The part where the smart move quietly shifts from leaving it alone to drawing it down with intention. And almost no one is ever told that the chapter even changed. Part 2. Why the IRS quietly loves your patience. Consider this from the perspective of the tax collector for a moment. If you were the one collecting the tax, when would you want that money pulled from the account? Would you want it pulled early in small amounts while the balance is modest and the person is in a lower tax year? Of course not. You would want it to remain in there as long as possible, growing larger and larger, so that when it finally comes out, the amount is enormous and the tax you collect is enormous too. You would want the person to wait. You would want them to be patient. And that is exactly what the rules are designed to encourage, right up until the moment they flip and force the money out all at once. For all those years in between, the system is perfectly content to let you sit on that account because every year it grows, their share grows too. Your patience is their profit. The longer you wait, the more they collect. They do not need to chase you. They do not need to send a warning. They only need you to keep doing the responsible feeling thing, leaving it alone, and time does the rest of the work for them. And understand how effortless this is from their side. They do not have to do anything. They do not have to audit you or remind you. Inaction is their entire strategy, and inaction is the easiest thing in the world to get a careful person to do because it disguises itself as wisdom. Every other financial trap requires you to make a wrong move. This one requires you to make no move at all. You keep being responsible, keep being patient, keep leaving the account alone, and the trap closes around you slowly, year by year, with your full cooperation and your sincere belief that you are doing the right thing. The people who get hurt the most by this are not the careless ones. They are the most disciplined savers, the ones who were proudest of never touching their retirement, the ones who did exactly what they were told. Their virtue becomes the very mechanism of their loss. And the system never has to lift a finger because it understood long ago that good behavior left unexamined collects more tax than any mistake ever could. This is why the forced withdrawal is not the trap. The forced withdrawal is simply the moment they finally collect on a setup that took decades to build. The trap was the waiting. The trap was every quiet year you let that account grow while telling yourself you were being careful. By the time the forced withdrawals begin, the account is as large as it will ever be, which means the tax is as large as it will ever be, and your ability to do anything about it is almost completely gone. You spent years loading the very weight that eventually lands on you. Part 3. The moment the bill comes. Due for most people today, around the age of 73, and even later if you were born in 1960 or after, per the Secure 2.0 Act, the government stops letting you leave that account alone. It forces you to begin pulling money out every single year, whether you need it or not. And because you spent all those years growing the balance as large as possible, the amount you are forced to withdraw is now as large as possible too. But here is what makes it truly punishing, and this traces directly back to the mistake. That forced money does not arrive quietly in a corner of your tax return. It lands as ordinary income, stacked on top of everything else you have coming in. And that stacking sets off a chain reaction. It can pull more of your Social Security into the taxable column, taxing the very benefit you spent a lifetime paying into. It can push you into a higher tax bracket, so even your other income gets taxed harder. And because Medicare costs are tied to your income from 2 years earlier, a rule known as IRMAA, the income-related monthly adjustment amount, those large forced withdrawals can quietly raise your Medicare Part B and Part D premiums down the road as well. One forced withdrawal, 3 or 4 different ways to get hit. Each piece feeds the next. The forced withdrawal raises your income. The higher income pulls more Social Security into tax. The larger taxable total nudges you into a higher bracket. And that same elevated income 2 years later lifts your Medicare premium. It is not one cost. It is a cascade where pulling a single lever trips 4 others. And every one of them is sized by how large that account was allowed to grow. Do not assume a modest income protects you, because the forced withdrawal is piled on top of everything else. Even a retiree who feels comfortably middle class can be pushed into territory they never expected. Taxed at rates they never paid during their working years, on money they were forced to take and did not even want. There is one more difficulty hiding at the end of it. When 2 spouses file together, they file on wider tax brackets and the income is easier to absorb. But after one spouse passes, the survivor must often file alone on much narrower single brackets while still being required to pull that same large amount out every year. The person left on their own can face the harshest version of all at the most vulnerable moment of their life. None of this is bad luck. It is the natural, predictable outcome of the mistake made decades earlier. The forced amount is calculated as a percentage of your balance, and that percentage grows every year as you age. age. So even in a year when the account does not grow at all, the government still reaches in and takes a larger portion than the year before, purely because of age. Combine that with decades of growth on an untouched account, and the forced withdrawals can become genuinely significant deep into your 70s and 80s. Precisely when health costs are rising and life is least forgiving, the mistake does not cost you once. It compounds against you year after year, exactly as the system intended when it encouraged you to wait. Part 4. The window where you take the controls back here is the genuinely powerful good news. There is a stretch of years where you and only you hold the controls over that account, and it is the exact opposite of the mistake. It opens the day you turn 59 and a half, because that is the day the 10% early withdrawal penalty under IRS rules finally disappears. Before that age, reaching into the account meant a penalty. After it, the account is fully accessible. And from that point until those forced withdrawals begin around age 73, you have a window. These are often called the gap years, and they represent the single most valuable, most overlooked opportunity in your entire retirement. Why are they so valuable? Because in those years your income is often lower. You may not have begun Social Security yet. You may be living partly on regular savings, which means there is empty room at the bottom of the tax brackets, room that is otherwise going completely to waste. And the entire correction for the mistake is this. Instead of leaving that traditional account untouched, you deliberately reach into it during those low-income years and pull money out, or better yet, convert it into a Roth IRA in measured amounts, filling that low-tax room on purpose. You pay a small controlled tax now at a rate you chose, instead of leaving it to grow into a forced withdrawal at the worst possible rate later. Every dollar you move during the gap years is a dollar that will never become a large forced withdrawal. It will never drag your Social Security into tax later. It will never raise your Medicare premium later. It will never burden the surviving spouse later. You are quietly buying out your silent partner one slice at a time, at a price you control, instead of letting them collect on their terms when you have no leverage left. Think of it as buying back your own money while the price is still reasonable. Your silent partner is willing to settle their share, but the price depends entirely on when you act. In the gap years, when your income is low, you can settle that share at today's known rates and measured amounts you choose. Wait until 73, and the price is no longer yours to set. The forced withdrawals decide the amount, and they land in whatever higher bracket your stacked income creates. You shift from a position where you name the terms to one where you have no leverage at all. And there is a deeper reason these years matter that almost no one mentions. Nobody can promise what tax rates will look like in the future. If rates move higher down the road, every dollar you convert now at today's rate is a dollar protected from a larger bill later. You are not just reducing the account. You are locking in a known cost instead of accepting an unknown one. The gap years let you take that uncertainty off the table calmly, on your own terms while the window is still open. Here is a meaningful bonus hiding in the earliest of those years. Because Medicare's IRMAA surcharge looks back only 2 years at your income, conversions done early enough, before that look-back window can reach them, do not affect your Medicare premiums at all. The earliest gap years, in your late 50s and very early 60s, are some of the most powerful years of your life to move this money. The very time the IRS hoped you would waste by sitting still is the time that can protect you the most if you use it deliberately. Part 5. How to actually reverse the mistake. So let us get practical. How do you undo years of leaving that account alone? The answer is patience applied in the opposite direction. Deliberate and measured, not a sudden dramatic move. First, hold the right mindset. You are not trying to empty the account as quickly as possible, and you are not trying to win some dramatic single-year victory. You are trying to gently and steadily move money out of the future taxable bucket and into the tax-free bucket year after year, so smoothly that no single year ever hurts. Think of it as releasing pressure from an overinflated tire slowly and safely, rather than waiting for it to fail under its own pressure. The moment you stop seeing that balance as a finished achievement to guard and start seeing it as an ongoing task to manage, everything changes. A trophy you protect by never touching it. A task you handle by working at it steadily until it is done. The retirees who keep the most of their own money are almost never the ones with the largest balances. They are the ones who made that single mental shift early, who understood that an untouched traditional account is not an achievement sitting safely on a shelf, but an unfinished obligation with a deadline attached. The deadline is 73. The work belongs to the gap years. The sooner you begin, the lighter that work becomes. Here is the core move. Each year during your gap years, you look at how much room remains in your lower tax brackets before rates climb. Then you deliberately convert or withdraw just enough of your traditional account to fill that low-rate room, and no more. You pay the modest, predictable tax on that amount now. Then you repeat it the following year and the year after that. Slowly, the future taxable account shrinks and your tax-free Roth grows. By the time forced withdrawals arrive, there is far less left to force out, so they are manageable rather than crushing. Less forced income means less of your Social Security gets taxed, lower Medicare premiums, and a far lighter burden for a surviving spouse. There are traps worth respecting, because this is a strategy that can backfire if applied carelessly. The first trap is moving too much at once. Every dollar you convert is taxable in the year you do it. Converting a large amount in a single year spikes your own bracket and can trigger the very problems you are working to avoid. The goal is measured year-by-year progress, filling the lower brackets without tipping into the higher ones. The second trap is losing track of account order. Most retirees have three types of money: already taxed savings, traditional retirement accounts, and Roth accounts. In a low-income year, many people will actually live off their regular savings while converting traditional money into the Roth, precisely because it keeps taxable income low enough to convert more at favorable rates. It feels counterintuitive to spend savings while leaving retirement money alone, but done with intention, it can be one of the most powerful moves available. The third trap is doing nothing because it feels complicated. That hesitation is the original mistake wearing a different mask. This is exactly the kind of multi-year strategy worth understanding deeply and reviewing with a qualified tax professional or financial advisor before acting. One additional option for those who are charitably inclined and have reached the appropriate age: money sent directly from a traditional IRA to a qualifying charity, known as a qualified charitable distribution or QCD under IRS rules, can satisfy part of your required minimum distribution without ever landing on your tax return as income. If you were planning to give anyway, directing that giving from the account the IRS is waiting on can reduce the account and your future forced income simultaneously, while supporting causes that matter to you. Here is a simple year-by-year picture of what the patient version looks like. In a given year, you check the room left in your lower brackets, convert a measured amount of traditional money into your Roth, and pay the small predictable tax. The following year, you do it again. Some years, if your income is higher, you do less or nothing. Some years, if your income is unusually low, you do a bit more. You are not following a rigid formula. You are reading each year and moving with it, always toward the same goal, gently reducing the future tax burden and growing the tax-free side. It is not dramatic, it is patient, and it is the exact opposite of the original mistake, which was to freeze and do nothing at all. The retirees who benefit most from this are not the boldest. They are simply the ones who refuse to sit still. Let us paint two pictures so this fully comes together. The first person made the mistake without ever recognizing it. They retired, felt proud of their large traditional account, and protected it carefully, refusing to touch it. They lived modestly, they felt disciplined, and then 73 arrived. The forced withdrawals began, large and unavoidable. Their income jumped. More of their Social Security became taxable. Their Medicare premiums climbed. They found themselves writing tax checks they never anticipated every year with no way to stop it, wondering how retirement had become more expensive than their working years. They did everything they were told, and the IRS collected exactly as it had always planned, because the mistake had been made quietly years earlier, the day they decided to leave that account untouched. The second person understood the mistake and refused to make it. At 59 and a half, they recognized the window. Through their 60s, they steadily converted modest amounts into a Roth at lower rates, filling the empty brackets deliberately, paying small, predictable taxes along the way. By 73, their forced withdrawals were manageable rather than crushing. A substantial tax-free Roth was ready for whenever they needed it. Their Social Security was protected, their Medicare premiums stayed low, and the surviving spouse, when that day eventually came, was cushioned by a calm, tax-free reserve prepared carefully during those quiet gap years. Same starting point, same rules, two entirely different retirements. The only difference was that one of them refused to make the mistake. And for anyone who feels they may have already waited too long, someone who learns this at 64, well into their gap years, feeling regret about time already passed, here is the truth. The window is not closed. Years remain before forced withdrawals begin. Those years can be used right now to convert and draw down at controlled rates. The lost years cannot be recovered, but the remaining years absolutely can be redirected. The worst outcome is not starting late. The worst outcome is never starting at all and letting the entire untouched account roll straight into 73. So regardless of age, if that window is open even partially, the move is the same. Stop waiting and use the time that remains. Your simple checklist 1. Look honestly at how you have been treating your traditional account. If your plan has been to leave it untouched for as long as possible, recognize that as the mistake, not the discipline it feels like. 2. Remember that a portion of that balance has never been fully yours. A share belongs to the IRS, and it grows every year the account grows. 3. Find your 59 and a half date. That is the day the early withdrawal penalty under IRS rules disappears and your window to act opens. 4. Map your gap years, the stretch between age 59 and a half and the year your forced withdrawals begin around 73. Treat those years as the valuable closing opportunity they are. 5. Each year, look at the room remaining in your lower tax brackets and consider converting or withdrawing just enough traditional money to fill it at a rate you control, without pushing into higher brackets or triggering Medicare's IRMAA surcharge. 6. Take particular advantage of the earliest gap years, your late 50s and early 60s, when Roth conversions do not yet affect your Medicare premiums. 7. Do not let the feeling of complexity talk you back into doing nothing, because doing nothing is the original mistake. This is the kind of plan worth reviewing carefully with a qualified tax professional before you act. 8. If you are helping someone you love, a parent or a spouse, bring this to them now while their window is still open. The most meaningful financial gift you can give is helping someone avoid a mistake that does not look like one until it is too late to undo. Let this be the moment you stop confusing patience with safety. With most of your money, patience is a virtue. With this one account, blind patience is exactly what the system is counting on, and it works against you quietly every year you practice it. The correction is not to panic and empty the account. The correction is to replace blind patience with deliberate, intentional action, small moves made on purpose during the years that belong to you. You do not need to be wealthy. You do not need to be an expert. You only need to see the mistake clearly enough to refuse it and to act while the window is still open. That single shift, from leaving it alone to steering it with purpose, is the difference between handing the IRS the largest possible share and keeping that money where it has always belonged, with you. Tap the like button so more retirees learn the real mistake before the bill comes due. And if you are not subscribed yet, subscribe right now, because the next thing the system is quietly counting on you to miss is already on its way, and we want you to hear it here first.